Welcome to Willing to Win. This week, we ask you to imagine being invited to play a game of chess with a friend. A few minutes into the game, your friend moves her pawn in a way you've never seen before. 5 squares forward, then 6 diagonally. The move has the pawn jumping over several pieces until it lands on a square on the other side of the board. It lands on the square your queen occupies and removes it from the board like she was capturing the piece, as if this was a normal and expected part of the game. Knowing something isn't right, you protest, insisting that no such move ever existed in chess. Looking hurt and a little confused herself, your friend calls up the official rules of chess online on her phone. She finds the section on pawn moves and offers her screen for you to inspect. What you find gives you a sinking feeling in your gut. Right there, in black and white, are the official description of the pawn move. And that description matches the move your friend just made exactly. You quickly glance around the room looking for hidden cameras, and you think to yourself, am I being punked? Am I on Impractical Jokers? Knowing you must be right, you call up another chess website and find the same description again and again. Site after site confirm the rules of chess, which haven't changed in centuries, have changed. Looking closely, you find a footnote that indicates the date and time the rule change occurred. To your astonishment, you see the date listed is today's date, and the timestamp tells you that the change was made during the course of your game. Not knowing what to make of what you've learned, you feel anxious and more than a little confused. As you struggle to make sense of the situation, a series of questions arise. You think, why would anyone change the rules of a game that survived unchanged for centuries? When did it become okay to change the rules of the game while the game is happening? And how did my opponent and apparently a lot of other people know about the change and I didn't? And how was my opponent able to respond to the change so quickly and use it to her advantage so expertly? This story is just that, a story, a means to illustrate what Alvin Toffler named future shock, the reality-shattering stress and disorientation experienced by people who have to process too much change too quickly. Future shock is real, and every one of us has experienced it in some way. If we don't take time to become part of the Willing to Win movement, if we don't understand that change is changing the world around us, if we don't build the tools we need to operate in a changing environment, then we are putting ourselves, the people we love, our communities, and our very way of life at risk. Consider the ways future shock affects our most senior citizens. We chuckle when grandparents can't operate household technologies without the help of the grandkids. We scratch our heads when seniors aren't able to navigate TV streaming services and opt instead to simply go without rather than risk asking for help and thereby exposing to the world what they don't know. We allowed those that once cared for us to feel shame for failing to understand what everyone else seems to know. If we take the time to walk in the shoes of others, we experience the world the way they do. And it doesn't take long to begin to see the danger. We know that one of the biggest risks older people face is isolation. Why go to grandma's when we can simply call her and make a video call? It's just as good. It isn't, and we know it. The absence of a physical presence is isolating. It is not only logical, but predictable. And left unaddressed, seniors, anyone in fact, can become progressively disconnected with the world around them. And it is important, as senior citizens are to our lives and our families, that their plight is only one example of what happens when we allow the arrival of change without building the tools necessary to navigate it. How are you helping others cope in an ever-changing environment? How are you coping with the changes in your world? If you've already started thinking about it, now is a great time to join the Willing to Win conversation and share what you've learned. If you haven't thought too much about it yet, now's a great time to join the conversation. It's time that you help us build a better tomorrow. It's time to say to the world that you are willing to win. Because the future starts now for those willing to win. If you're willing to think different, willing to work different, willing to change at the speed of now, then you're willing to win. Welcome to Willing to Win. I'm Jeff Kaplan.
And I'm Tara Thomas Getman. Thank you for being a part of our ongoing mission to really educate you about how change is a-coming and how we respond to it can really make or break how our future moves forward.
Well, that's it. And even the future and now, all these are really complicated things. So I want to ask you to try something with me, and you can try along, at home as well. What I'd like you to do is think about right now. And I want you to do it with a bit of accuracy. So when you're at home thinking about this, think of right now. No, not a second ago, Tara. Right now. Think about right now. No, that's before. Think about now. It's kind of impossible, right? Because time keeps moving, right? Well, let's try something different. Think about being right here, but not right now. Think about being right here in this place, on this planet, in this universe. Just think about where you are right now in the universe. You could do that, right? Now try to do them both at the same time. Think about here and now. Think about here and now, right? And it's sort of like that thing they had a few years ago, which was everybody wanted to do the multitasking craze, right? And then science came along and proved that there's no such thing as multitasking, just fast switching. And that's really what we do with our concepts of reality. Right now, here and now, we're both here and we're now, but there's no way to know them both at the same time. So we come up with pragmatic ways to deal with the world around us. And that's what we're here to do with Willing to Win, trying to figure out pragmatic ways for us as a community to deal with the future that comes. And I think one of those ways that's probably the one that, is really the subject of these shows as much as any other is the idea of environmental sensing mechanisms.
It's amazing because when you hear the concept of an environmental sensing mechanism, it may sound really complex, but in fact, through technology and other ways that we've evolved as a society, they're all around us. So whether we choose to take advantage of them is often a personal choice. But let's just talk about the watch, the wearable device, for example. It's become now not just something that, it's fun, maybe I can receive a text. For some people, it's a life-saving factor, right? Because it can track everything from, your heart rate, which could be significant for people who have heart problems. There's a new one coming out called the AirBot, where it's going to sense pollutants around you so that you can determine, should I jog or should I do my workout indoors, especially if I have a breathing condition, for example, like asthma. There are also water bots or devices that can track the water quality when you have a desire to swim in a lake or you're going to, go fishing. So these environmental sensing mechanisms are around us oftentimes in ways that we may not even acknowledge, but there are these tangible examples too. Even when it comes to allergies, right? Because they can be deadly for people. We have somebody that is a listener who's actually training a dog to be able to detect the cinnamon that she is deathly allergic to. I mean, it's amazing, right? The sensing mechanism is a lifesaver.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and take a look.
We have 3 containers. One has cinnamon oil, one is empty, and one has powder. Smell. Good boy. So that was the powder. This is the oil. Smell. Good boy. Can you smell? Good boy. This one is empty.
It's amazing, right? So talk a little bit more about these environmental sensing mechanisms and how they impact our lives.
Well, first of all, when you're an academic, it just sounds cool, right? I mean, oh, let's talk about environmental sensing mechanisms. But it's really not that complicated at all. Environmental sensing mechanisms are something we're used to every single day. How do we go through the world, right? If we're lucky enough to be sighted, we see the world around us, we hear things in the environment. So the 5 basic senses we have are the guides we have so that we can navigate the environment. What we're trying to figure out is, going forward in this new world of the future, what are the environmental sensing mechanisms that we need to develop so that we can navigate tomorrow?
Right.
So that's what it's all about.
Well, and the thing about it is, when we look at history, there were major environmental sensing undertakings that we perhaps didn't react to because it was something that we'd never experienced before, right? So it's how things are constantly changing. And it reminds me of, there are people who I've talked with living in Washington State in the 70s. The sky went dark in the middle of the morning. And it was the most unusual Chicken Little, the sky is falling concept. Turns out it was the day Mount St. Helens erupted.
Oh, yeah.
So there was no clear sign that anybody could say, I've previously experienced, or I understand and can sense the change that was coming, because it was epic. I mean, it was something that no one in their lifetime up to that point had experienced. Similarly, let's think back to 2 years ago when we were all going about our daily normal lives, and we started to hear about, in a faraway country, there was a new virus that could be extraordinarily deadly. But at that point, we were so removed from it, perhaps we weren't activating our environmental sensing at the level that we should have been to be able to anticipate and respond more effectively when the change impacted us, because it ultimately resulted in a global pandemic.
Yeah. The more you think about this, it kind of reminds me of a music producer. You ever seen them at those big tables that have all the dials and the knobs and stuff, and they're trying to create music and they know what all these things mean. What we're really trying to do is come up with some environmental sensing mechanisms, but 3 different types, right? We certainly want to know that there is a threat at our door, right? So by the time COVID became COVID, we knew it. There certainly were plenty of people talking about the possibility beforehand, but with all the other things going on in the world, how do you turn that knob up to know that this is a real threat that's coming, and we need to start taking, becoming aware of it earlier, so we can make preparations and may have been able to have much better outcomes than what we experience, right? So I think that's really where it's at. How do we know what's happening now, right? How do we know what's coming, and then if possible, how do we predict it even before that? So in California, which is where I grew up, the big nirvana there is that someday they will be able to predict earthquakes, well in advance of when they happen. Right now, they know about 3 or 4 minutes, before it happens, not enough time to tell people, and then there's that, the possibility of a big issue. But living in the Midwest now for 10 years and going between tornadoes and earthquakes, I still got to say, I know you're scared of, everybody in the Midwest is scared of earthquakes. I will still take them, because it only lasts for 6 seconds, and you always have a beautiful day to clean up in, which is cool.
I will respectfully disagree. When I have this argument with West Coasters, the thing is, when we Midwesterners have a potential tornado, we can go to our basement, we can go to our bathtub. In California, when the earthquake comes, there's nowhere to go. There's no safe space.
But 6 seconds later, you can go to the beach. But no, when we talk about environmental sensing mechanisms, and we start to realize, this whole change conversation that's going on, which many of our viewers may not have even been aware of until this show, but after watching a few episodes, you'll start to see things differently. My wife and I recently got a chance to go to the Dancing the Stars Roadshow. Do you know the show?
Yes,
Dancing
very
the Stars?
popular.
Yeah, so it's a show on TV where famous people and people not quite so famous get a chance to go on and dance with a professional dancer and compete. And this roadshow was an opportunity for the professional dancers to come out and sort of show their stuff. And I didn't know what to expect. I certainly didn't expect to see in front of me a willing to win conversation, which is really what I found out, right? The show had no beginning, no dialogue. There was no story in the show. It was just a series of sections of dance that were dedicated to specific topics. And here's where the willing to win comes in. The first topic was the dancer came out and said, we have discussed this and we want to make sure that you know how we feel as dancers. Number one, we feel it's okay to be vulnerable in this world. To let people know that you're a vulnerable person is okay and that that's a form of strength. The second thing they talked about was the idea that it's okay to be iconic, to go ahead and find that passion that's within you and celebrate that passion. And the third thing is to really let yourself be yourself. They had a whole section dedicated to transparency and what it means to sort of let your freak flag fly, right? So that was cool for dance, but it just struck me that we were literally having a willing to win negotiation conversation right there at Dancing with the Stars, where they were negotiating, how much do we show of ourselves? Can we be ourselves? Can we show our passions? Can we be vulnerable?
That's great. And here you thought it was just going to be pleasing your wife, who's a huge fan of Dancing with the Stars, and it turns out you had this deep, impactful outcome from watching that production. So I love how you dissected its hidden agenda beyond just the dancing. That's great.
It is true that she is the Dancing with the Stars fan. I probably would not have gone on mine, but it was a great evening if you get a chance to see it. It was a lot of fun.
Well, we have more to come as we continue to break down change and its impact on you. Be sure to join us, willingtowin.org, willing2win.org, to be part of the conversation, and we'll be right back.
Willing to Win is produced by Lift Productions. Guests on the program are not compensated, nor is their appearance representative of the Willing to Win views. Willing to Win does not necessarily endorse any people, products, or services.
Welcome back to Willing to Win. I'm Tara Thomas Getman.
And I am Jeff Kaplan, and we're here to talk a little bit more about this idea of change and the environment. The environment is a really big thing, whether it's a community or a nation or a world. To try to get people to come together and be connected is one of the biggest challenges we as the Willing to Win Legion face. And I will tell you, a great example of that has historically been the Olympics and the way they cover the broadcast. Now, I don't know if you know it or not, but of course you would, because you've got the broadcasting background. There are really three big chunks of content that go into the Olympics, right? There's the advertising dollars, because of course we've got to pay to put these games on. And then of course there's the games themselves, right? But the number one content that's created for the games, that's actually created for that event, is all about bringing us together. And it's the backstories. It's the backstories of the athletes. And you guys, have probably seen it if you've watched the Olympics. But the basic idea is to take somebody who has no connection to a particular sport or a particular athlete or a particular team, and to make that connection in such a way that people are not only watching, but they're involved. And so you may not be really into curling. You may live on the West Coast or in the Southeast where it's sunny all the time, and those aren't sports that anybody plays. So you may not be very interested in that. But before that curling event comes on, they tell you that the favorite is this young Canadian girl. And since she was 7 years old, right, she has been practicing at curling. And she goes outside and she gets on the sled, the dogs, she mushes those dogs 64 miles uphill, both ways, to and from, her 18 hours a day of training. And then she goes to school, right? And she's been doing this for years, and the family is entirely focused on helping this young lady win. And by the time you come back to watch the game, to watch the sport, you are into it. You have a vested interest in her story. And so by the time it comes back, you're like, sweet baby, sweet, right? It makes it much, much more exciting. And so, that's really where the Olympics have been. But this year we had a really special challenge, because the Olympics are being held without audiences because of COVID, right? And as a matter of fact, Stephen King put out a tweet, and it was a really simple one, and I'll leave out the expletive for our audience. But he said the Olympics this year are F-word deleted weird, right? Because there was nobody there.
Right.
But they tried to combat that from the very first moment. The very beginning of the very first broadcast covering the Olympics was the stories and the visuals of young Olympians when they were 5, 6, 7 years old, jumping off of furniture, on a trampoline in the backyard, doing ridiculously dangerous things for their age, right? And then the parents talking about how this is how they've always been. They've been different. They've been dedicated. This, had to be how it turned out for them, right? And so they really strove to try to connect us to that. And they did it with the parents because the parents weren't going to be there. So we were talking to the parents in their living room who are going to have to watch their kids around the world have this experience without them. And then all of a sudden, this environment that didn't have people felt welcoming to us from our furniture into that environment. I thought it was a huge, huge challenge, and I think NBC did a great job.
Well, and it's amazing because, they created community where you really didn't have the community of the crowd that is so imperative to make the Olympics what they are, because you see the cutaways, the cheering section, and the parent who's watched the child come, work his or her entire life to get to this point. And I have to mention, when you talk about the tug at the heartstrings, that is my all-time favorite television commercial born out of an Olympics, where they were talking about a child who was actually an orphan, and she was physically impaired. I mean, she had some physical disabilities, and it showed the mother's vantage point sitting in, on a phone decades ago when she was being told, we found a baby you can adopt, but your child is going to have all these limitations in her life. And as the woman is talking, the scenes are unfolding, and the exterior of the shot is the now adult Paralympic swimming gold medalist swimming around the perimeter of the mom. As her story unfolds, she goes on to become this celebrated Olympic athlete. And so, I can't watch that without almost tearing up or even talk about it, because that's how much it moved me. And as you described, it creates that connection, right? The connectedness that we all want and want to be able to live out when we watch something like that. But when you say no crowd, it just seems like it would be so disjointed, and yet telling that story successfully overcame that obstacle.
Well, that's one of the magics of social media too, because we could think that like the stuff I just told you were unique insights that were unique to me and nobody else saw it. But then you come across, something on social media which sort of lets you know that other people are thinking just the way that you are. And that story that I was telling you about the curling and the, sweep baby sweep, is one that I've been, saying in my keynote speeches for about 15 years, right? So we've been talking about that concept for a while. And you can imagine my surprise when I checked out social media and came across this video. Let's take a listen and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Try to thread the needle, baby. Look at this shot right here. Here comes Vicky. Look at this focus. Look at her eyes, baby. And she releases the stone. Come on, Chris, baby. God that rock, son. Whoa, baby. Sweep, son. Sweep, baby. Sweep. Sweep, baby. Come on, baby. Whoa. Thread the needle, son! Thread the needle! Here it comes, baby! Here's the needle, baby! And he threads the needle, son! Whoa, baby! That's a 3, baby! That's a 3! It's all tied up, son!
It is so funny because you have been saying that sweet baby sweep thing for years, and here the video now confirms that others feel the same way.
Yeah, I remember my staff said that to me and said, I think this is your story. I'm like, oh my gosh, we laughed so hard. And I hope you enjoyed it as well at home. But that's really what it's all about, But there's a lot of other things that have to do with change and the environment. And we want to talk about one that we found in social media by going out to our social media expert for a light look at social media. Let's hear from Alyssa Nolte with The Socialite.
Socialite.
We've been talking a lot about environmental sensing mechanisms in this episode, and a great example is the cars that we drive. You have your backup cams and your blind spot monitors, all things to help you be safer on the road. A great example is Tesla. They have all kinds of cameras that are designed to help you be safer when you're using their autopilot feature. One such example is their pedestrian monitoring feature. It's designed to make sure that as you're driving through the road, you can see people, dogs, and other objects to make sure that your autopilot won't hit anyone as you're driving down the road. We found a video on social media where people were taking this pedestrian sensor to a new level. They were driving through a graveyard to see if they could spot any ghosts.
It's walking.
What is it? Is it behind me? Video it.
have to admit that creeped me out a little bit. That's strange.
And it's not the only one. There's videos all over. That's not even like the best one I picked. There was one where it actually showed a dog on the graveyard screen. It really terrified me, actually. Don't watch them at night.
So those were actual ghosts, though, right? I mean, did I understand that correctly?
I mean, it's up to you. It's up to you to decide. Only you can decide if that was ghosts, a headstone, or just a really poorly tuned Tesla. It's up to you.
But those are the kind of things that we're talking about. If you were to go, if you were to do a reverse time capsule, right? If we were to put ourselves in a time capsule, go back in time, 30 years, people, we're acting completely differently. The average person is never more than 3 feet away from their phone at any time, right? And for you, maybe like 1 inch. I don't know. But for most people, that's just the way it is. But 30 years ago, that would have just seemed like completely odd, right? And now we've got people going around with cars that are self-driving cars, trying to use the apparatus to find ghosts.
And your Tesla even does Netflix now, so it's not even, you don't even need your phone to entertain you. Go find some ghosts, watch some Netflix, and have a great time.
Well, thank you, Alyssa, for that social light update as she continues to have her finger on the pulse of what's happening, what's trending that really aligns with a lot of what you're sharing in terms of the deeper message.
Absolutely, and we hope that everybody enjoyed this episode as we started to examine, how change and the environment is really, happening right now around us. But I think with these episodes and with these examples, we can start to help you become more aware of these changes and find out, what is your opinion? How do you want to adjust to these in your own life, or to help somebody who may not be adjusting so well to help them have a better time of it all. And that's what it's all about.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. willingtowin.org, willing2win.org, to join the conversation and be a part of the Legion. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.